Hello everyone. I wanted to come on today and show you the cover that I'm creating for the LapBook project. Boy, try saying that 3 times fast. Lisa covered hers this last week, and I'm just now getting this video done. I have to do a lot of editing and a voiceover. Again, the voiceover went pretty well last time. I'm hoping it goes as well this time. My book's a little different than Lisa's. Lisa started to put her cover pieces on in one piece, then decided to tear it up, and then went back to one piece. Well, because she was tearing it up, I tore mine up. So, they were pieces of this. I used a brown paper bag. I crunched it, I inked it with StazOn Timber Brown, which my Timber Brown for some reason looks awfully green. It's old, so I think that's the problem. Anyways, I will be doing a voiceover showing you everything about it. Mine is only 2 books instead of 3 books. So this is where we stand with the outside cover finished and the inside cover ready to be done. And I hope you all have a great afternoon and enjoy. Okay, so last time we had gotten the covers all put together with Tyvek spines and reinforcing the spines and all that kind of thing. Well, one of my covers was a bit shiny, probably had a gloss finish on it, plus the Tyvek can be pretty glossy, so I did a little scruffing up on those things with a piece of sandpaper. The other cover, that tan one there, brown one, it had sticky tape on it to hold the book jacket on. So what I did was make sure that there wasn't any residue left with my sandpaper. And I didn't sand it very much, but you can see by the baby wipe that there was definitely some dust. You do want to be careful, make sure you get all that dust cleaned off. And now what I'm going to do is paint it. And the reason for painting it is that the covers were 2 different colors, but more importantly, that white Tyvek is likely to show up underneath. So by painting the whole book the same color, it didn't make it all the same color, but it made it plenty close enough to look at and know that it wasn't going to show through what I'm going to cover it with. I used a tan paint because what I'm going to cover it with is brown paper bag. So I felt like the tan paint was very close. And this is just, a really fast paint job. Now, granted, I sped the video up a little bit, but it's not something you have to worry terribly about. You're going to cover it up after the fact, so this is just a little bit of, let's make sure that we've got a pretty even coat. Doesn't have to worry about brush marks, don't have to worry about anything. But it does seem to take a long time to paint. Now, I did end up putting 2 layers of paint on. I let that coat dry, and then I went back and painted it again due to the fact that it just didn't really cover up the white. So here's my brown paper bag, and I am just cutting the bottom off and cutting it down the seam. I wanted one big piece, so I was trying to use a bag that was whole, and then ended up tearing up all the pieces. Believe it or not, paper bag is not easy to crunch. If you get a nice big paper bag, it's hard to crunch it. I was checking the size. Oh, that's where I had the seam that was double and overlapped, and I didn't want it. Now, I decided I better test out my color and what I was doing. You never know what's going to happen with your ink, that kind of thing. So these are my test pieces. The other thing was is I hadn't decided if I wanted black or some other color. And also, while the paper bag is really, really sturdy, it can be more fragile than you think. And I did tear it a few times. That was one of the things that led me to decide to tear my pieces up. That's my black StazOn ink pad. And I use StazOn. You want to use some kind of ink that is permanent due to the fact that you're going to be putting it on with a wet glue and you don't want your ink to be running. And I'm just rubbing the ink pad across the bumpy parts of the paper. That's where I realized my StazOn ink pad was green and not brown, and I thought, well, maybe re-inking it would help with making it brown. It didn't, so oh well. So I decide that the green of this timber brown is what I'm going to use, and I start crunching up my big piece of paper. And you see, it's not it's not as soft and easy as you might think. Brown paper grocery sacks are really pretty sturdy brown paper. Um, I had to scrunch it multiple times. Now, I know some people have said scrunching it wet is helpful, but I have found that wetting that paper makes it more fragile. And so I'd rather a couple of tears that I can mend rather than having it be wet and sloshy. So now I open it back out. Another reason for doing this in small pieces is the fact that the brown paper, um, it is hard to work with in that great big chunk. I would not tear it up in small pieces before I inked it, though. I might have torn that in half just to make it easier to work with had I realized I was going to um, tear it up later. And see, if you just gently rub that across, it will catch on the high points of your wrinkles. Which I really like. I think it's a really neat technique. It was fun to do. In a few minutes, you're going to see it gets very, very messy. So I inked it, and then I decided to scrunch it back up again so that I would get different wrinkles, or hopefully get different wrinkles. I also think I decided that it wasn't getting enough ink. That I wanted it a little inkier, if that's a word. Inkier. I don't think that's a word. Lint. Yeah, see, just a little bit more ink, just, I don't know, it just seemed to set it off. This is where we decide to tear it up. And I just tore big chunks up. This was fun. Now, what's the really fun part is I decided that those pieces needed to have their edges inked. That, in a few minutes, is going to be so boring. Watching me tear up paper is one thing, but watching me ink it all is going to be very, very boring. See, there we go. I'm going to ink it. Ink, 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 ink. Look at those hands move. Don't you think that you want to ink this fast? Yeah, if my hands move that fast, I don't know. Okay, so now it's time to really start the messy part. I have my book. I have my Mod Podge and glue mixture, which those of you that watch my videos all the time know I use about half and half Mod Podge and Elmer's glue all mixed. I like it mixed like that because it does not seem to make everything pages stick together. Even though I use matte Mod Podge, they still can stick together with just Mod Podge. Now I'm laying the paper over the edge about an inch, maybe. I'm not terribly worried about it. I want it to wrap around to the back later. And it is going to be later because once I get the paper all on this thing, it takes a while to dry. That paper was wet and the Mod Podge soaks into the paper bag real well. So it's one of those things that you need to let dry. I was very, very pleased with how it came out. It just takes time. You do want to make sure that you see how I'm working that glue into that crease of the spine. You want to make sure you get your paper and Mod Podge down in that crease real well so that as you fold and unfold your book that it holds up. Now the Mod Podge is sort of a sealer, so it's going to help add some durability to your book. I just wanted to show you again that you really, really need, oh, why don't I not get busy on that crease? And see, the edges are not even, and I'm not worrying that they're even because I am going to cover up things inside, especially I'm going to be making pockets and all sorts of things. So it doesn't really matter that it's not straight on the outside edge. What matters is that I have enough to wrap around the edge of the bookboard. Push that down into that crease. Just and I did use a lot of Mod Podge. Before it was all done, I was very sticky. Just make sure you get your creases good. Sorry, this does take a while. Um, Not forever, but it takes a while. And if you take your time with it and get your Mod Podge really soaked into that paper, it comes out great. Another reason I like to use Mod Podge for some things like this is that I have found that it's flexible when it dries. Uh, the Mod Podge glue mixture bends a little better. I don't know, just seems to work real well for me. And not everyone likes Mod Podge, but I do. Um, okay, so we're coming to the end of the top coat. Like I said, I was messy. I had sticky all over my fingers, so be prepared to have some place to sit this where it can lay there and get dry. Lisa went on and folded her backside edges. I did a dub right there that just was to stretch and make sure that everything was flexible. But now it's dry and I'm going to fold the edges in. And do not try to do this while it's still wet. You want to make sure it gets really good and dry before you flip it over like that. Um, I'm going to fold the corners in just like I would if it was fabric or I was doing it with something else. The fact that it's in smaller pieces does mean that there's, a few places where you have to wiggle it, like that right there. That little spot is was a little hard to manipulate because I didn't overlap the piece quite enough. I was too close to the corner. I should have thought about my corner a little bit better, but that was the first one I started with. And honestly, it folded around there so nicely. The paper bag took the glue, it softened. It was very much like using fabric, but being able to just really glue it down. And this is just, it involves a little manipulation here. And once again, I got my fingers pretty well covered with goop. I found that sometimes rolling the edge of the paper around with my fingers instead of the brush really made it work better. Okay, so we're about to get to the end of the folding the back edge around. Um, Once that got done, it really needed to dry. Um, Now, because of my week this last week, I didn't get this done in a day. I did this and then I left it sit, and who knows if I even got back to it the same day. I don't remember. Um, I just know that each step of this needs to dry so that you can flip it around and do different things. Um, and as wet as that paper got, it needed some serious dry time. Y'all also know I don't like to use the heat tool, but once it got dry, I realized I had missed a couple of spots. And I also knew that I really wanted to make sure that I got Mod Podge all over the edges of the book. The fact that I put it on and then folded around, I wasn't sure that the very, very edge had gotten done very well. So it's funny, the places I missed were all in one end, and I think that was the first end, and I must not have been paying close enough attention. But I was glad I found them before I went any further. The other thing is to do the edges, what I had to do was do an edge, and I did half the book, and then I left it to dry standing up. And here you can just see, I was just trying to get the Mod Podge on the edge. Well, I can't lay it down because it's got some on that edge. So what I did was I did one half the book, and then I let it dry, and then I flipped it over and did the other half the book. I also went in and after all the edges were dry, I put a second coat all over the cover of my book. And it's looking really nice. And as you saw in the beginning of this video, it turned out real well. I'm very pleased. Can't wait to do the insides. Lisa is off this week. She's got a shoulder injury and she won't be doing her book Monday night, but can't wait to finish this up.